All right, ready for a deep dive. We're tackling a pair that might seem straightforward at first glance, but trust me, there's more than meets the eye. Gemini and Virgo compatibility.
Yeah, it's deceptive, you know? You see Mercury and you think, oh, easy peasy, but it gets surprisingly nuanced.
Okay, so the source we're looking at keeps mentioning this whole air sign thing with Gemini. What's the deal with that? Like, what does that even mean in a relationship?
So when we talk about airiness, we're talking about that connection to like communication, intellect, ideas always flowing. Think of Gemini energy kind of like the wind constantly moving, always on to the next thing.
And Virgo, even though they're also ruled by Mercury, how do they fit into that?
That's where things get interesting. Virgo's an earth sign, so they're all about the practical, the grounded. Gemini's up in the clouds, Virgo's down here like, okay, but how does this actually work?
So you've got this tension between air and earth, this kind of like big picture versus tiny details thing happening.
Exactly. The source actually uses the terms extrovert and introvert, which I thought was kind of a cool way to think about it. Gemini wants to talk, share every thought. Virgo's more like, let me think this through first.
Oh, yeah. I can see how that could lead to some misunderstandings. The source actually gives this really relatable example about a news story.
Oh, right. Like, imagine a Gemini super excited telling their Virgo partner about some crazy news story, and they just want to hear what they think.
And Virgo's like,
Fact-checking. Suddenly they're down a rabbit hole of sources and dates and like, wait, but is that even true?
well, Gemini's already moved on to the next fascinating thing.
Totally. And that's where things can get messy, right? Gemini feels like their parade is being rained on. Virgo's wondering why Gemini can't just focus.
Oh, just so much for that whole same planet, easy compatibility idea, huh?
Well, the source does say it can be a strength, but only if both partners really try to get each other. Like Gemini could help Virgo lighten up, and Virgo could help Gemini, actually finish something for once.
It's all about finding that sweet spot, right? Where instead of clashing, they actually like boost each other up. Okay, this is fascinating. Now, the source also got into emotions, and this is where things got really interesting for me. They were saying that Gemini actually has more emotional depth than people realize, which seems kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah, it's funny how those stereotypes work, right? The source talks about how Gemini's nestled between Taurus and Cancer.
So, like, surrounded by feelings.
Exactly. It's like they pick up on that energy, the sensuality of Taurus, the deep emotions of Cancer. It all kind of seeps into Gemini.
Like a little emotional sponge. Never thought of it that way. Okay, so what about Virgo? The source mentioned Venus being in its fall in Virgo, which, for anyone who doesn't speak astrology, just sounds kind of ominous.
Yeah, the fall sounds intense, but it's not as bad as it seems. Venus is all about love, beauty, pleasure. And when it's in its fall, it's just kind of out of its element, like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
And how does that play out with Virgo specifically?
Well, Virgo overthinks everything, right? So when it comes to love and relationships, all those Venusian things, they can get in their own heads, overanalyzing, being self-critical, that kind of thing.
So Geminis are secretly swimming in emotions, and Virgos are trying to analyze their way out of feeling anything. That's quite the combo.
Right. And it kind of sets the stage for this big thing the source talks about, trust.
Yeah, the source was saying that trust, or like the lack of it, could be a major pitfall for these two. Something about Gemini's, and I quote, trickster nature.
Yeah, they use that phrase, but it's not about Geminis being, like, malicious or anything. It's more about that airy energy, Always exploring, always kind of flitting around.
Which can make Virgo feel a little insecure, maybe.
Exactly. Because Virgo wants stability, they crave that grounded feeling, and Gemini can seem, well, a little all over the place.
Then you throw in Virgo's overthinking, and it's like recipe for disaster.
Pretty much. Virgo's going to be analyzing every word, every move, looking for clues, when really there might not be anything there.
The source mentions something about, like, challenging planetary alignments that could make this whole trust thing even worse. Can you break that down for us non-astrologers?
Basically, it just means that life throws curveballs, right? Stress, unexpected events, even just a bad day, all that can amplify those underlying trust issues.
So it's like those doubts get louder when things get tough.
Exactly. But hey, there's some good news. The source also said that neither sign is particularly prone to jealousy. So at least there's that, right?
That's got to count for something.
It does. It means there's a foundation of respect, a willingness to give each other space, which can be really healthy, especially for these two.
Okay, but I feel like there's a but coming.
But, and this is important, it doesn't magically fix everything. Gemini still needs to learn how to be present, to communicate clearly, to reassure their Virgo partner.
And Virgo, what can they do?
Loosen the grip a little. Trust that Gemini's need for freedom isn't a rejection. It's just, well, it's just how they're wired.
It's all about finding that balance, isn't it? Okay, so we've covered communication, emotions, trust, all the heavy stuff. Let's lighten things up a bit. The source briefly mentioned shared activities for these two, and I have to say I'm very curious. What do a whirlwind Gemini and a grounded Virgo actually do for fun together?
Right. It does seem like an odd pairing, activity-wise. But the source had some ideas. It's almost easier to imagine it. Paint a picture. Like, let's say they go to a library.
Okay, I'm already laughing just picturing this.
So they walk into this beautiful library, shelves upon shelves of books. Virgo immediately beelines for, like, the history section, totally engrossed.
And Gemini, what are they up to?
Gemini. Oh, they were interested in the mystery section, but then they spotted a display of vintage maps and, well, exactly. Virgo's deep in thought about ancient civilizations, and Gemini's off chatting with a librarian about lost cities.
This sounds less like a shared activity and more like a recipe for a sitcom episode.
Yeah.
So are shared interests even possible for this pair? Are they just destined to be on different pages, literally?
Not necessarily. It's just about understanding that shared interests for Gemini and Virgo might need a little reframing.
How so? Give me some hope here. What can these two actually do together that won't end in utter chaos?
Well, the source says it's less about finding identical interests and more about tapping into their shared values. Like, both signs are super into intelligence, that resourcefulness, even a bit of practicality.
Okay, I'm seeing the glimmer of hope. So what does that look like in real life?
Puzzles. Hear me out. Intricate puzzles. The kind that really make you think. Gemini loves that mental challenge, right? And Virgo, total detail-oriented puzzle masters.
Oh, I love that. It's like they each have their own little zone within the bigger puzzle.
Exactly. Or even something like, imagine this, a playful debate.
Ooh, with these two. We're playing with fire here.
That's why it has to be playful. Pick a lighthearted topic, something silly even. It's not about winning, it's about that back and forth, the mental sparring that both signs kind of crave.
Using their powers for good instead of evil? I like it. What else you got?
Well, the source did mention travel, but with a twist. It's got to be the kind of travel that stimulates their brains. Think exploring a new city, hitting up museums, maybe even some historical sites.
So instead of just soaking up the sun, they're soaking up knowledge.
Exactly. It feeds that Gemini wanderlust while giving Virgo all that rich history and detail. It's like the perfect blend.
So to wrap things up for our listeners, it sounds like the key with Gemini and Virgo is not forcing it. It's about recognizing that their differences, while they might seem like obstacles, are actually where the magic happens.
100%. When Gemini can embrace Virgo's depth and Virgo can loosen up a bit, learn to fly a little with Gemini, that's where you get that spark.
And maybe even a little bit of heaven on earth.
Maybe even a little bit of heaven on earth. Who knows? Astrology never gives us all the answers, but it sure gives us a lot to think about.
That's what we love about it. It's not about predicting the future. It's about understanding ourselves, our relationships, and how it all fits together. This has been fascinating. Until next time, keep looking up, keep exploring, and we'll see you in our next deep dive.